Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar by Irresistible Church Network. We're so happy to have everyone here today. We are having a slight technical difficulty with our host, Justin Elam, today, but he'll be joining us very shortly. But before he does, we can all go ahead and get started. I can begin introducing you guys to our guests today. So today we have John Wagler with us from Hill City Church in Richmond, Virginia. Yeah, and also we have Joel Thomas from Buckhead Church here in Atlanta, Georgia. So, hey guys, we're going to get started. Why don't you guys just tell everyone a little bit about yourself, how long you guys been doing this, and we'll go and get started. So, John, you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, hey guys, my name is John Wagler. I'm from Hill City Church here in Richmond, Virginia. My wife, Lacey, and I co-lead the church. We planted it in September of 2014. And so this will be anniversary number 9 coming up in September, which is super exciting. And Richmond's a interesting, quirky little city. A lot of people call it the sister to Portland. And so it's got a fun little diverse, racist, quirky atmosphere to it. And so it's just part of but we love it here. It's just an amazing city to be a part of, and a ton of history. And our church is positioned uniquely, even on a location, kind of, if you're looking at locationally, because we're right on the border of the city and the county. And so it's a sweet little spot there too.
Excellent. Excellent. Love that. Thank you, John. Thank you for that just insight and perspective into where you guys are doing ministry there in Richmond. What about you, Joel? Want to give everybody a couple of sentences about yourself?
Yeah, thanks. I'm here at Buckhead Church, one of North Point's campuses. We're in the city, close to the city of Atlanta here. And I've been back here for a year and a half. I was actually the first intern at North Point back in 1998 and was on staff for 17 years. Then took a job as a senior pastor of a church for almost 7 years in Arizona. And we moved back about a year and a half ago.
And we're glad to have you back, my friend. Welcome back. Always love that little trivia nugget of you being the first intern at North Point. I love that. That's awesome. I love when that comes up. Good. Well, hey guys, in just a second, Justin Elam is going to be joining us. But just want to let you know that as part of Irresistible Church Network, the whole reason that we do these webinars and these things is to help church leaders like yourselves go further, faster, especially when it comes to designing your churches to engage unchurched people. And we all know that part of doing that is preaching. And then we all know that part of preaching now is how do we leverage technology in our preaching. So that's what Justin and John and Joel are going to be having a conversation about today. So with that, I'm going to sign off, turn it over to Justin and these guys, and you're in for a treat. Thank you guys for being here.
So how perfect is it that on the day we're talking about leveraging technology in ministry, like the computer bonks like minutes before kickoff, like could not have predicted a better start to this. So anyway, what we're here to discuss today, I missed actually Louis' introduction. Did you talk about your churches and all that kind of stuff? All right. Well, what we're here to talk about today is we're here to talk about maximizing technology, especially when it works in your communication, in your preaching. Both of you are great communicators. One of the things I love about both of you is you're not just good communicators, you're both kind of innovators in that you don't mind trying new things, experimenting with things. And so you're really the perfect people to talk about this. And so we're going to talk about a mixture of sort of the communication principles, which all communicators watching and listening to this can benefit from, and then some practices of how each of you execute that differently in your churches, and even some preferences. What are some stuff you guys do because of how you're wired and gifted? And so Louis might have already mentioned this, but if you have questions, we're going to have a Q&A time coming up, and we'd love you to just tell us where you're from and enter your questions in the chat along the way. Louis, who you've already met, is going to be vetting those questions. Then when we get to the Q&A, he'll start serving up to me, assuming all that works. So you've given some background on your churches. Did you talk a little bit about how long you've kind of been communicating from the platform?
We did not.
Why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I did say that, our church has been, it'll be 9 years in September. And so I'm the primary communicator in our church. And so that's been the bulk. I mean, I did communication and college ministry before that, but primarily I'm the communicator here at Hill City for the last 9 years.
9 years. Okay. Joel, what about you?
Well, I was a student pastor for a number of years. Then I was in college ministry, was a singles pastor, taught in different environments there, then became one of our lead campus pastors at North Point, which came with it some more teaching responsibilities. But I didn't really start preaching really weekly until about 8.5 years ago now. For the 7 years I was in Arizona, I was preaching, 30 to 35 to 40 times a year.
Wow.
Before moving back here. So that's sort of my journey.
Yeah. So plenty of reps for both of you. And just maybe start us off and tell us a couple things. One is, what's some technology you're using now as a part of enhancing your communication? And maybe even, I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember the first time you used technology as part of a message? Like, you may not remember that because you've done it so often now, but what are you using today? And maybe where did it start?
For I guess I'll go. For me, I primarily use an iPad from the stage, and I am able to actually create all my own slides, do my own slides, control my own slides, and then have the ability to, use a highlight live, write on it, draw on it, and have been doing that for about 2. Actually, it started the week before COVID was the first time I tried it. And then it was actually super convenient because I was able to use it all through COVID. And it added a little dynamic to what we were doing, when we were online the whole time. And so it was kind of serendipitous that we started it then. And the first time I can remember using any kind of technology was back when in college ministry. I think it was the first time I remember like interrupting a sermon with just a video. I know it seems so like nothing, but it was just for the first time preaching, and I interrupted with just a little video from a movie, and people like freaked out about it. And I was like, oh, this is something you should do. You can't just talk for 35 minutes, so yeah. That's the first time I remember doing it, that there was like a response to it.
Cool. What
that's
about you,
good.
Joel?
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's going back that far, like between pictures and video and stuff, like when there were screens, using stuff like that. I guess that was probably the first for me. Although the first time I used the TV was the first time I preached at North Point on stage. And it was like, Andy had started using this TV, and it was like, I was like, do I have to use that? And he's like, you don't have to, but I think I can teach you how to use it and it be more effective for you. And so I was like, I was definitely open. So I was like, all right, let's try that. So that's kind of how that started for me. So I don't think it was actually the very first time, but it was one of the first times early on when I first started preaching at North Point. I wasn't the lead pastor at that point. I had just been on staff for a few years. I think I was still the college pastor, but he had started using it, and we weren't using it like in all of our different environments like a lot of people do now, but it just seemed kind of good to use for continuity, and I actually kind of enjoyed it. So
yeah. So why don't both of you take us through sort of the preparation process? So you're getting ready to do a message, you're kind of going through structuring the content, you're sort of exegeting the text, you're doing all that part of the process. But at some point you start thinking about, how do I represent this visually? Do I leverage technology? If so, how? Tell us a little bit about each of your processes. Maybe Joel, we'll start with you. Tell us about where does the technology part fit into the larger preparation process?
Yeah. So this has been an evolution for me. The funny thing is I have always, since I first started writing messages, I always start with a blank piece of paper. I don't know why, but I've always done that. I usually have a blank piece of paper and my Bible, and like I'll have a passage or a few passages. I'll write some ideas, and then I connect them. If you're familiar, with like mind mapping. I think it's my version of mind mapping. It's sort of like how do all these things fit together? What's the relationship between them? And the blank piece of paper doesn't feel as confining as a Word document to me. So it's sort of like I eventually get to that place, but I've always been a bit more visual. I used to do graphic design, so I put myself through seminary. I did a lot of graphic design for advertising. So I sort of always, that was sort of how it worked for me. And the funny thing is it took a long time before I actually did that on stage. In fact, there was a joke. I got this. Some of you may be familiar with King of Pops. It's like this popsicle thing in Atlanta. And somebody at one point, I like, interacting with things. And so I used to use a lot of illustrations and messages. And like, I think Ryan Gray is a guy on our staff. He gave me the nickname King of Props at some point because it felt like every time I was using a prop in my sermon, and it felt gimmicky, but it felt like I wanted to interact with something. And then I haven't done it in a really long time since I started drawing. And the way that happened was I just had an idea that I wanted to draw one time on a flip chart. And this is while I was in Arizona. And when I drew it and I wrote something and made some connections, like I remember after the first service, somebody came down and said, "Hey, can I have that?" And they wanted the piece of paper. I'm like, sure, we're going to throw it away. And then somebody else was like, "Oh, can I take a picture before they take it down?" And this started happening a lot. And then people started posting the pictures on social media and stuff. And our team was like, "Hey, we need to do more of this." Cause like people are interacting with it. And then anyway, I did some studying on, most people, conservatively, 60% of people are visual learners. Above 40%, visual is their primary method of learning. And so it just seemed to connect. And honestly, it made me better. I felt like each time I started drawing, I would simultaneously get more positive response and feedback from people. And so it wasn't only helpful for people, it made me better. And so I've never turned back. I just it's what I do.
Yeah, that makes sense too, that for you, it's actually the process starts with how these ideas relate to each other spatially. Like that's how your study starts. So it kind of makes sense. It ends up that's the way you like to represent it to others. John, what about you? Talk about kind of where does this part of the process come into the overall prep process?
Yeah, so for me, how I start off with just sermon prep is, and part of this is technology, actually. I have a private journal that I keep on my phone, and I've kept it since 2011. So every note I've ever taken on any sermon, any book, anything, I have it stored, and everything is tagged as well. So if I want to do a series on like generosity, let's say, I can literally go in and type in generosity. It pulls up every post I've ever done since 2011. And so what I do is I will group things. I'll kind of look through that and group all my notes together. And then, obviously with the passage in hand that I'm going through, and I'm trying to just like create the storyline basically, and how I'm going to connect things in the process. And so once I figure the storyline of where I'm going, and I start working out through my notes for each week in the sermon, I'm trying to figure out, because I really do love how our brains work. And we actually, we hired someone that's, she's an instructional designer. And so she specializes in how adults learn. And so we actually hired her for our discipleship process. She works with my wife, Lacey, but she's done so much with us to help us learn how adults learn. And so, your brain, she calls it chunking. And we can take in a certain amount of information for just a certain amount of time. And the way our brains work is the new information pushes forward, the old information pushes back, but you have to figure out, because our brains, it takes so much energy with the new information. You have to figure out how to give it breaks. And so when I'm figuring out through my notes is like, okay, I've probably been speaking for, 6 minutes at this point, roughly. How can I do something with a break that startles the brain a little bit? Is it, an image that flashes up on the screen? Is it, making sure there's something, a question I can ask to get people to pause and reflect, and that comes on the screen. Or she's talked to me before about how important it is for me to highlight and circle words, and like even like draw little arrows. But when I'm drawing the arrows, draw them kind of in a rhythmic motion for the brain, because your brain will just, it'll follow the word and it follows like the arrow. And so it makes your brain like begin to switch. And so whenever a drawing, I watched one of Joel's sermons, it's the same thing. Like when the drawing is happening, your brain is literally like following it, and it's taking in the new information. And so those little breaks enable learning to happen. So when I'm going through my notes, I'm trying to figure out, okay, here's like a really good spot to maybe put in a drawing, or put in something that connects in a different way. Or sometimes if I haven't, because sometimes you do a sermon that feels more like, oh, I should maybe just talk for 30 minutes. You know, I know it's not the right thing, but it might be hard to figure out a drawing or something. I've done a lot of stuff with like live polling. And so, or like little word clouds. Cool. And so people text in answers to things, and then up on the screen, like this word cloud will pop up. And then whatever the common words are, they get bigger with other ones. So it stimulates the brains in a different way. And so I just try and figure out and pick little spots to do that.
So it sounds like have you done this enough now to know sort of it's become more intuitive to you, meaning when I look at my notes towards the end, I can tell this is a long section of exposition. I need to, because I know how people's brains work, I need to give a break here. So is it more of a feel thing for you now because you've repped it enough that you kind of know?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Last week, I was just doing a section in Jonah, and I knew it was just going to be longer. And so I literally had intentionally put a question that I stopped my sermon, and I did 1 minute of reflection on the question. And then I paused and then I prayed with everyone over the question. And that was like, it was specific. It was cool. It was multi-use. It was important, I think, for people to reflect, but I also knew they're probably going to need a break right at that moment. And so I was like, we're just literally pausing in silence. It was just dead silent for a minute, and it lets a reset. And then there's the question, and then we prayed together.
Yeah. That's good. That's a great example. Like you did, but you were also thinking like this is a powerful moment in the message, but it also sounds like you were thinking this will allow these brains to kind of catch up with where we are. Correct. And then we can move on.
Yes.
That's great. Joel, so we talked a little bit about your use of the whiteboard. You use the whiteboard, you interact with the LCD screen, you probably use a confidence monitor at some level, I'm guessing. Like there's a lot of technology interacting on a Sunday morning message. And there's a team of people that I know you work with that are, waiting on you to tell them what kind of technology is going to be necessary for the message. Like, what does it look like to interact with the SPD team, which the term we use here is SPD service programming. It's just the people who execute the Sunday morning environment. What does it look like in terms of meeting deadlines for them, and when you have last minute changes, which not saying you ever do have last minute changes, but in the event you did, like how would that go? But what's that interaction with the SPD team like?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty predictable, and I learned a while ago that if we were going to retain people on our team and we were actually going to enjoy working together, I was going to have to provide a predictable work experience for other people. And so it is a little bit confining for me, but I figured a system that works out well for me. I will outline a series like at a really high level, like well in advance. Like I'm preaching a series after Easter. I've already got all three of the messages at a high level outlined. The team knows what we're going to talk about. They know the passages for each week. They know the main ideas, or not the main ideas, but the basically we have a big picture topic, and then there's three key ideas. One that I'm going to take each week because it's a 3-part series. I won't write that first message until 10 days out. I've tried writing further out, and I don't feel connected to it when I get to the message. So 10 days out is as far as I can get for me in terms of really still feeling connected to the content. I'll write it 10 days out. Usually I finish it on a Thursday. I send it to the team. That's my commitment, that I'll send it to them, the final outline, or I say the final outline, a draft of the outline 10 days out. And it's pretty close to final. And then the Monday, the week of, we always have a content meeting. And so I walk through the content with the whole team. I talk about, I've noted in my notes, here's where I'm going to draw things. Here's the things that I want to put on the TV. They've seen all that. They get all that on Monday. I get feedback from the team. Sometimes I make slight changes. Sometimes I make significant changes based on the feedback I get. I usually get them that final outline I make those changes, get that to them by Wednesday so that they have time to make any changes to slides or whatever they need to, whatever support they need to provide for the weekend. And then usually it's not until Sunday morning, because that doesn't really matter for them. They're just the slides, usually David's the guy that creates my slides, David Hill. David will send me the slides Thursday afternoon. If I have any changes to the slides, every Saturday night I send them, hey, here's an update. There's usually some small changes here and there. They're not that big a deal. He always knows that that's going to be part of the process. He makes some edits Saturday night. Monday or Sunday morning, I come with the sheet that I've drawn of what I'm going to put on the board, and they can see in my notes like when it's going to happen, so they can shoot it easily through video. And we walk through the slides, an hour before the service or something like that, after run through. So
that's great. John, what about you? Like, it's interesting. You're controlling your own slides. So I find that kind of fascinating in some ways, because I'm like, the concentration that takes, that's another level. But like, that may or may not impact the way you communicate with your team, because they may not need to know as much as somebody who's controlling the slides. Like, what does it look like for you to prep your team for what's going to happen Sunday morning?
Yeah, the only thing I can't do from my iPad is play a video if I wanted to play a video. Other than that, I can do everything from my iPad, and it's actually a relief for the booth, obviously, because like they don't really have to do anything, and I make my own slide. Our process is obviously a little more organic, but I make my own slides. It's part of my weekly rhythm, so I don't even like think about it anymore. It's just like a normal thing. It actually kind of helps my prep, because I'm like piecing things together. And so with how things look and everything, I always ask Lacey, because she's an artist. So she helps me with like spacing, or if something just doesn't look right, or I've drawn stuff for her and I'm like, can you see what this is? And typically the answer is no, but like we figure out some of those elements together. And then with the team in the back, I just kind of, honestly, on Sunday mornings, like they don't, unless there's something new that I'm like, hey, I need help with. If we're doing like a live polling or a quiz, like we've used like Kahoots for quizzes. We use menti.com for the polling and word cloud stuff. That is run through the booth. So if I'm doing something like that, I will tell them by Tuesday that we're going to do something of that nature, so they'll know. And I'll tell them like when that's going to happen in the context of a service. If we have a guest speaker, we kind of do the I would say the older process of, they get us the slides, we make the slides, they do it from the booth, and then we kind of do a different run through. But If it's me, I use the iPad.
Wow.
And controlling my own slides is not that big of a deal. You get really used to it. Honestly, it's we don't have like a confidence monitor or anything, but like that almost kind of serves as one, because I see what's coming, and I have my notes up on the stage too, but it is like I've gotten used to it. It's just like anything else, you kind of get in a rhythm with it.
Right. So the view you're looking at has the view they're seeing and the preview of the next slide. Is that the view you're looking at?
I can if I want to.
Okay.
It depends if I'm gonna draw or not, but
gotcha.
Yeah.
What are some other technologies either you've used or you've seen others use effectively? Might not be something you've used, but you're like, man, that was a really excellent use of technology, and either you didn't see it a fit for you or you haven't had an excuse to use it yet. What are some things you might have seen? Some examples might be, LED walls. I've started to see some people use those kinds of things. What are some things you've seen?
I've seen some stuff with LED walls that are just super cool. We don't have the budget for that or anything, right. But like, man, it is super, super cool and innovative, that like added dynamic to even like where a scripture passage comes up, and they're able to do other things. Like, it's fascinating. On a more simple level, I've never used it, but I am like thinking about playing with it, is Prezi. I've seen some really cool presentations done with that are so dynamic in the way it comes off the screen. I've not done much with it, but I have. It's super cool.
Joe, what about you?
What's funny is I was I love what John does with writing. In fact, I've tried some of the different technologies writing on the TV, and honestly, I wish I could interact with that a little bit better. I don't love. It's probably just preference, but I wouldn't love working with an iPad looking down. I feel disconnected from the audience, but that's a personality thing. I don't feel that way when I watch John preach. He doesn't seem disconnected from the audience when he's down on his iPad. I feel that for myself. But I do wish, in fact, analog, which is kind of what I'm doing with chalkboard now, but with a flip chart, like back in college ministry days, I used to print out, like I go to Kinko's and print out the scripture on a big piece of paper and put it on a flip chart, and like tape it on there, and then and I would write and draw and make connections and highlight, and I really like that idea. In fact, I saw a few years ago, I don't know if he's still doing this, John Piper did a bunch of online messages where he did a lot of this, where like they were kind of like, I don't know if it was a podcast. John, did you see that? Where he has a bunch of messages where like he puts the scripture up and he talks through it, and he'll like highlight and talk about some other things, and then he'll erase it, and then talk about anyway. And I just thought it's really helpful, because I think I love drawing people toward the text and helping them connect with the text. And I really like that about what WAGS does. So.
Yeah, I love that idea. I mean, I think at North Point, I've noticed we try to highlight the words, but it's totally different. Like John was saying, your brain actually totally follows the drawing. Right. So,
is there something cool? Yeah, I was just going to say, like with the highlighting, why I also, one of the other like side benefits, honestly, is it's crowd participation. So I will literally I've done it so many times, in scripture, there's so many so that, it's like, it says something, it's like, so that. And even now in our church, I'll just highlight it, and the congregation will just almost naturally read it. So it's like a crowd participation. I can circle it and be like, what's this say? And they're reading it. So it forces some interaction with the crowd. And that's one of the other reasons I like doing it that way.
Yeah. So talk about what you see happening in the future. Like, what technologies do you see coming that you think are something you're keeping your eye on that may work its way into either the prep process or the presentation process?
Well, we talked about this earlier. I don't know how many people have followed this stuff with Chat GPT, which I'm definitely not an expert in. I have seen a little bit of it. If you don't know anything about it, it's a new platform that uses advanced algorithms. And it's a robust search engine, basically, that searches words, and it can use your voice, it can learn your voice, and it can help you write or reorganize or research. I just think, we were talking about this earlier, I don't know, I'm not super drawn toward it, because I enjoy the process of the writing, and I know there's a lot of different applications for it, but I could see it being incredibly useful. It certainly could cut down a lot of time in terms of research and help make you a better writer, help you hone your style, help you organize your thoughts better. So I know it's brand new, but I have several people who are trying to sell me on the use of it and why we should be utilizing it, and in particular with growing communicators who haven't figured out their voice or are trying to learn how to better organize their content. So,
yeah, I guarantee you there are pastors right now typing in, give me 3 different examples of an Easter message. I promise you that is going on right now.
for sure.
John,
not on this call. Not on this call.
Not on this call.
These guys all write their own sermons.
Yeah,
but
these are everyone here is led by the
somebody
Spirit,
else
not by
out there
ChatGPT.
is doing that. That's right.
John, what about you? Are you seeing anything that you're kind of keeping your eye on that you might consider adding in, or what are you seeing?
For right now, other than what Joel was just talking about, I'm at my limit personally, like right. what we're using, right. And I feel comfortable doing. I'm always willing, in particular, the woman, Rachel, that I was saying that we had hired, like she's always like talking about maybe some new things presentation wise that might be coming. And so I'm always willing to try something. But I don't know anything off the top of my head that I've seen outside of what we've talked about already that is something I want to try or anything like that.
Yeah, I love that. But I love that you have this relationship. I know you have a lot of universities there in Richmond, but you built this relationship with this instructional technologist. And now you have somebody that you can say, hey, what are you seeing work? What are you hearing out there? So even if it's not necessarily a technology you leverage, it could be like, hey, we're seeing a lot of emergence of this kind of crowd participation technique and presentation. Like that to me just feels like in its own way, it's a constant sounding board for innovation around, how people learn, which that's one thing I've definitely noticed is people more and more you hear pastors talking about understanding. We have so much more understanding about how the brain works that I've noticed more pastors are learning about how the brain works and working that into how they construct their messages. What were you going to say, John?
No, I was going to say it's even transformed like even our discipleship process, like how we do curriculum and how we help coach our leaders and help them like with their own groupings and stuff like that. It's fascinating when you start learning how our brains work and what that means for us being able to retain information. And she is like constantly challenging us on different methods and that we can look at and use. And how I will say this, I love the crowd participation piece, like whether it's polling or word clouds or it is instant gratification and it's fascinating. And even the times I've done it, it's been really neat because a couple of times it's actually changed the direction of my sermon almost instantaneously. Wow. Like based on what came up, I was like, oh, and I had to like adjust on the fly, which was like kind of a fun challenge to do. And so having those little things, because it makes you think something's one way, but if you pull a poll out there and all of a sudden it comes up differently because it's all anonymous, so you're getting real answers, and it changes the dynamic of the room.
Yeah, for sure, man. I would love to be sitting there when you like pivot from what you were going to talk about based on the word cloud, where you're like, okay, different call to action here.
Same. Now. I don't want to be you, but I would like to be there to see it.
Yeah. Well, I got one more question before we go to Q&A. We've got some questions starting to come in. Joel, this won't shock you, but I don't know if you guys can see the chat at all. I hope not, because
I was just scrolling through. I was trying to see. I get amazing. The people in Australia, it's 2 and 4 a.m.
Dave Adamson is in the chat. So I think Dave has been holding his own webinar, answering everyone's questions while we've been going.
Nice.
While we've been going here. So good to have you, Dave. Dave's like, oh, I got an answer for that. So we'll see what's left over after Dave has answered all the other questions. But before we go to the last question, I just wanted to say, for those of you that are kind of tuning in, maybe what the Irresistible Church Network is. Louis mentioned it at the top, but really it's just hanging out with leaders like Joel and John here and other people that are trying to learn from each other and handing off their ideas and how do we make church more effective. All of this is to help people pursue their relationship with Jesus. That's why we're communicating. How do we do that more effectively? And it's just a group of leaders figuring that out all over church. So if you at all are interested in joining that conversation, Louis is actually the one facilitating the chat right now. He'll put his information out there for you. And he's the one that talks to everybody who might be interested in joining the conversation. So that's just an opportunity if you're looking for a group to kind of ideate with, like these two, great representation of that network. So if you're listening to this and you're saying, I'm based on these questions, I think we have a lot of people that are already full on in this world because a lot of the questions are very specific about what apps you use and stuff. So I'm sure there's a mixture of lots of experts on this, but also if you were going to give one piece of advice to somebody who's taking a step into adding the technology to their presentation, what's a principle, what's a practice, what's one piece of advice you want to give out for taking a step, whatever that looks like for someone in this space?
I would say make it simple, like slow and simple, and make sure it fits in to what you're trying to. Don't use technology to try and wow someone or surprise someone. Just make it fit into the flow and make it as simple as possible that you feel comfortable with, and so that the process is easier.
Yeah.
Good.
That's great.
I think it has to be authentic. Like I see people try to copy other people and things that other people do. And I've done that. I'll just tell you, like I'm not trying to be self-deprecating. I think when I left here to go to Arizona, I was a mediocre version of Andy. Maybe mediocre might be generous, but like I was trying to copy his style, which obviously if there's somebody you want to learn from or somebody you're going to copy, he's a pretty good one to try to emulate. And I did learn a lot from him about preaching, but we're very different. I was never going to be a great version of Andy, it's like, so I think it has to be authentic. And, and I'll just say, he wouldn't mind me saying this, like we've had our difference of opinion, even me being back, like where it's like, hey, this is how we do this. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's how you do it. And the thing I would say about Andy is when he preaches, like, he's a litigator. You get to the end of his sermons and it's like, you have an airtight argument. You feel like, I tell people all the time, I feel like I'm in handcuffs because it's like, well, I guess I got to do that because I can't argue with it. You kind of create this airtight case. That's just not who I am. For me, yeah. I want people to experience something with me and us to sort it out together. And, the illustration I would say is, Andy's a fastball pitcher. And if he wants me to, if I'm going to try and throw fastballs, I can try, but I'm not going to be great at that. I know how to win throwing off speed pitches. And so you got to figure out what's your style and what can you be great at? Because,
yeah,
there are techniques that work. There are principles to follow, but you have to kind of find something that fits you the best and feels natural to you. And I think that's probably the similarity, even though what we do is very different. The similarity between me and John is that we both found something that feels good. It works for us. And when it works for you and it makes you a better communicator on stage, like when it feels better to you and it feels more natural to you, it will connect better with the audience. It has to.
Yeah. Total great advice from both of you. I'm going to pivot, jump into some questions. We'll see what, if anything, Dave Adamson has left us. But the first one is just a simple, John, what do you use for live annotation? What's the technology?
I use Notability.
What about that?
It's super easy to use. Yeah.
What about the app you use for journaling on your phone to access your notes and search them?
Since I started in 2011, it's literally just Blogger. There's an app for it, and it's super easy. I literally use it when I'm working out, all points of the day. Literally, it's funny. Like I have from a Drive conference. I just have notes from one of Joel's talks back, I think in 2000, either 11 or 13. It's just like Joel Thomas, like Drive conference. And actually it was a pivotal talk for me being a lead pastor. But so I've used that. And then what's cool about it is you're able to tag what your post, you can tag it, the content of the post, and then it just stores everything for you.
Wow. What about
That's
that
cool.
platform you're using for the text poll results live? You said Menti, was that it? I can't remember.
Yeah, Menti, MENTI.com. And it's free. If you only want to do like 2 questions, it's free. I think if you want to do more than that, it'll cost you something. It's not expensive. And then we've done quizzes with Kahoot.
So John, somebody wants you to unpack a little bit, walk them through the word cloud moment. Like what does that actually look like from this is how you set it up, this is how the technology I use, this is what happens on the screen. So they want to hear a little bit more about that.
So I'll just give you an example of like one time I did it. I asked a question, what do people want out of a church? And I asked them, they text in one word, like text in a word. And so, or 2 words. I mean, it can handle, a few words, but so it might say like kids programming, great worship, whatever. And so as all the results are coming in, it just pops up on each word pops up on the screen. Anything that are duplicates, the words get bigger. And so what we do is we just text the answer into this number. And then, and so what I did then was I had scripture on their chairs, and each section had a different scripture passage. And then I had the next question, which was, what does God expect out of the church? And so then they had to answer what it said. And so then I was able to compare both word clouds together, like side by side. And they were totally different. So it was like the best illustration that I've ever done. But like showing what people wanted was different than what God wanted from the church. And so it just kind of pops up in that way. So that's the way we set it up. You just text it in. You text in the answer with the number on the screen.
Yeah. That's great. Probably goes without saying for everyone listening, but I wouldn't debut this at a middle school. I wouldn't debut the word cloud at a middle school event. Probably not the right crowd.
I'll say this, there have been a couple of like borderline inappropriate words that have gone up of someone trying to be funny. I just think in those moments, you just try and be funny, or you preemptively say, something to kind of skirt that issue.
Yeah.
But another one people can use is Slido. We don't use that one a lot, but we've used that. I've used it before. Slido is a good one.
So Joel, this person wants to know, like, what do you find most helpful on the confidence monitor? Like, how do you decide what goes on there?
So I put a lot of content on there. I don't necessarily read it. I put it on there to see it, and I highlight certain words. But honestly, it's funny. I just saw Nick's in the chat. He was on. We were on staff together out at Mission. He can attest to this. Usually, my content goes like from like I have way more content than I end up. There's a lot on the cutting room floor, so it's like half the time I get the sermon, I don't really like to use my notes. I've already internalized the content. I know the content. I don't memorize it, but I do internalize the content to where I don't necessarily need my notes, but I need something to keep me on track, because half the time I forget what I cut and what I kept. And I'm also responding like, John, I want to be present. I want to respond to what's connecting in the room. And when people audibly respond to things that I didn't know that they were going to audibly respond to, or I couldn't anticipate. Usually I've gotten better and better at anticipating that. But when I think I'm decent at reading the room. When I figure out like, gosh, these people are responding to this, I want to continue to press into that. And so, but I put a very, they're bullet points, and there's usually like 3 bullet points on every preview slide. And there's a whole bunch of them. Like I have like almost my whole talk is on there. Again, not to read, but they're just the main ideas, so that I don't start talking about stuff that I already cut from the message. So that helps me stay on time. That's the biggest challenge I have is the time limit. And because I've studied to preach 4 hours, worth of content, and I'm trying to get it to, 35 minutes or so. And so I put a lot of content on there, and, we have a system where the person that's following me and again, it's kind of strange because there's a ton of stuff I won't say on there, but if I want them to move to the next slide, I'll just mention something that's on the very last line of the preview slide. Even if I've not said anything else on there, they know that's go to the next one. So
yeah, that's interesting. I remember when you were mentioning, Joel, what you put on it, I was talking to one of the pastors in the network about how they use that. And one of the things they were saying is I was trying to, there were certain sections of my message that I actually wanted to say word for word. And they were like, I was using this confidence monitor. It was all bullets and it was all simple. And I realized, like, what am I trying to prove here? Like, if I want to say it word for word, it's okay. Like, I'm not getting some kind of medal
just read it.
Doing it,
Yeah. Right.
So he would mix that. Like, he had bullets where he needed bullets, and he would actually like, so it just shows, like, there's, again, like you said, when you know who you are, find what makes you comfortable and effective. This is for both of you. How much technology is too much in a sermon? And is there any way to find that out other than trial and error?
I mean, I think we've all seen examples of people try to do too much in a sermon. They way too many pictures, way too many videos, way too much, like, trying to write on the screen and, text in, and, I think it gets distracting at some point. But I don't know, John, how would you answer that? I mean, there's for sure you can do too much. We all know when we see it. I don't know how you figure out where the line is, but we all know when we see it.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think some of it's trial and error. I mean, I for sure have done too much at times, and I think some of it's trial and error. I just try to get better at, like, when I'm looking at my notes, being specific about moments, and I feel like, highlighting scripture and drawing on scripture and connecting things, I feel like you could do that several times over the course of a message, because you're just in the passage. I think other things like videos or whatever, those are select moments.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think, like you said, Joel, the funny thing is, what I think like you said, you can see when it's too much, and it seems like over time, people that are like you guys who are repping this a lot, you just know it when you feel it. Like, you make less and less mistakes over time because you realize doing 3 separate technology moves in this talk is too much. And I've learned from trial and error, and so it just doesn't seem to be. It seems over time you just know what that feels like when you're prepping, and at least that's what I've seen. So, what about the online audience? Somebody wants to know, are you even engaging the online audience in any way? And if so, how? During your live message is what they really want to know.
We stream so they see what's going on the screen online, and so they're interacted in that way. Do I specifically do something for online? Not typically. I'm not. I probably need to be better about recognizing that and saying something, but I don't. But they see what's happening. We obviously our size church and everything is different, but our online experience is very simple on a Sunday, and so they just get the sermon. There's no music or anything. It kind of comes in at the sermon time, and so it's really simple. But they're online, like, they will see what the sermon content is. They see the drawings, or they see the highlighting, or whatever. But so it's not like they don't get to see that and experience that in the same way that person live does.
Gotcha. Joel, this person wants to know where you bought the glass board from.
The one that we had at Mission?
This just says, where did your team source the glass board?
So it was actually a black plexiglass board that I used at Mission. What we're using here is literally a chalkboard. I mean, we made it, but it's a chalkboard. Clay used to use this light board that was really cool. The team hated it because you could see through it. It made the text really brighten up, but you could see through it. And there was all sorts of like reflection issues, which we dealt with a little bit at Mission. You know, you have that with the TV as well. I don't know. I don't know what to be honest with you, we've been recently looking at, I think we've brought in 4 different models now of smart boards that I've tried so far that I don't really like any of them yet. Honestly, part of my problem is to draw and to write on things. And this is like, applies to like 0.5% of the people on this chat, but like, there's like, you need some like sort of, at least when I'm drawing, I need some sort of friction to draw when it's too slick. And like everything right now, if you're writing on a smartboard or on TV, it's like there are pens and there are things like that. I need something that has like a rubber tip or something like that's like, or felt that you know, provides a little bit of friction. That's what the nice thing about the chalkboard is. It's got some friction. It makes it a little bit easier to, I saw somebody say, how do you write so clearly? It's like, it is what John does. It's really hard to write on that glass surface clear and clean. It's like, it's too slippery. And so like, you know, and I don't know if you've tried this, John, they have things that go over the top of it. You can get some of those, the pens with the special tip that has a little bit more friction on it. But I know for me, the only way I can write legibly is to have that sort of friction that allows me it slows the pen down and it makes you write more deliberately or draw more deliberately. So
it's for sure hard. Honestly, there's been so many like humor moments that it provides. And it's truly like, if anyone was wondering if God still does miracles, it's a miracle. I have not drawn like a penis by mistake or something on a drawing or, you know, something like, I mean, it is, but yeah.
And it's a miracle. I haven't written a word. One of the hardest things for me is I write words. I'm speaking one word and writing a different word at the same time on the board. And I've misspelled several words before, but it's coming where I'm going to write something completely inappropriate on the board because I misspelled something or whatever.
Couple more questions here as we wrap up. One is just has the prevalence of any of the short form content that is becoming more and more ubiquitous? This person's talking about TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Reels, things like this. Is this impacting your preaching? Because I don't know who asked this. This may be an attention span question. It may be a technology question or both. So
I think it's super interesting. You know, right now we have the emergence of these short form stuff, but yet, I mean, long form podcast is as popular as anything else that's out there. I mean, there's 3-hour podcasts, and it's like people listen to Joe Rogan religiously. And so like, you know, I think it all depends on the setting and the format. And certainly we try to utilize we're not doing anything like super long form like that, but we try to cut things into shorts. Or we've also found, you know, it's so funny, the more and this will be an encouragement, the more produced our videos are. Like the videos that we do where Andy's promoting a new series, they perform terribly. In fact, it was so funny because the North Point team was trying to get Andy to do this thing before one of my previous series. The team asked me if I could do something to promote the series. And I was literally at my son's soccer game. And I was like, sure. I put my AirPods in and I talked about the upcoming series while I was on the sideline at the soccer game. It was like our highest performing promotion, including all the videos we've done of Andy, you know, to promote a series. And I think there's something about that real organic, like, that performs much better right now in terms of what people want to see. They're not looking for advertisement. Everything else, all that stuff looks like advertisement. They're looking to connect with somebody. That's why people are online, I think. They're not on there to like find the best products. They're on there to connect with people. And when I'm on the sideline at my soccer game and I have something I want to tell somebody, it feels more genuinely like I've actually thought of them and I have something I want to say, rather than I've got a teleprompter and we got all the lighting right. And it's a beautiful background and all that stuff.
Yeah. That's interesting. John, any thoughts on that?
No, I just think all the short form stuff, I mean, it obviously works. There's you can't ignore like the statistics around it. Like it matters. I do agree with Joel. Like there's also this appeal to the long form things too, but that is part of, honestly, when I think through messages, making sure it's not like just long, if there is like an element of, all right, here's a break, here's a break, here's a break, and in terms of like the live setting. So it does impact it for sure.
That's super interesting. That's kind of what you're doing. You're creating short form, within your longer form. You know what I mean? It's like that idea. Yeah. I'd love to hear more about that. Maybe we do a whole webinar and just bring your lady on, let her talk to us about. That'd be cool. I'd log on.
That's actually a great idea.
That sounds super interesting. I mean, that could be very helpful.
Well, I just want to say thank you to both of you guys for making time. Thanks for sharing with this group today. Thanks to all of you who took time out of your day to tune in and be a part of this. We know your time is super valuable, and we're super appreciative of it, and especially appreciative of what you're doing to reach people and to make your churches more and more effective, make your sermons and your messages more and more effective, because you believe what we believe about the gospel, and that's the hope of the world. And so anyone doing what you're doing, we just are incredibly grateful to support and just amazed and grateful for. So thanks for what you're doing to make your churches more and more places where unchurched people can come, feel safe, and fall in love with Jesus. So thank you guys for today. We'll sign off for this time, and maybe we'll bring that instructional technologist on next time. That's a great idea. Thank you guys a lot. Appreciate it. Thanks for all you guys do. Take care.
Thanks, guys.